All right, y'all, going to try and get through the second president, John Adams, in a relatively short amount of time. So we have our first president, George Washington. He says he's only going to run for 2 terms, not going to run for a third one. Says that in his farewell address. You guys know that already. So now you have really the first presidential race that's going to happen, because you have 2 candidates that are going to be able to compete against each other because they're both kind of equally popular. You have Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Jefferson is a Democratic-Republican. You have a good idea of what that means. He's going to prioritize what his beliefs are going to be politically. And then you have John Adams, who is running against him. He is a Federalist. So these 2 individuals running against each other, and it's a relatively close race. You got the breakdown right here with the Electoral College votes. You have John Adams over here in the pink, and then you have Jefferson over here in the green. So Adams is going to win by a very narrow margin, but he is still going to win the presidency, and he is going to become the second president of the United States. The way that this works way back in the day is if you become the president, then the person that comes in second becomes the vice president. So John Adams being first becomes president of the United States. Thomas Jefferson is going to become his vice president. So what are the things that Adams is going to deal with while he is president? So that conflict that Washington was dealing with, saying, hey, we're going to be neutral in, is still going on. That conflict between England and France, they're still fighting out in the sea. Well, France has gotten frustrated with the United States because they're saying, hey, we helped you during your revolution. You're not helping us when we need assistance. So what they start to do is they begin to attack American merchant ships and seize those ships and take their sailors, take American sailors at sea. Britain has been doing that already. That's called impressments. When these British ships show up and they kidnap American sailors that are formerly British sailors, that's called impressments. France is attacking U.S. merchant ships, a little bit different. So what ends up happening is Adams doesn't want this to lead to war. He doesn't want it to lead to conflict because he wants America to stay neutral. Washington says in his farewell address, hey, you guys need to stay neutral, and Adams wants to continue that neutrality. So what Adams does is he sends several diplomats off to France, and he wants to try and negotiate some sort of agreement that they can all come to in order to ensure that these U.S. merchant ships are going to be safe at sea. He doesn't want France attacking them anymore. He doesn't want to get into any sort of conflict with France, and so he sends diplomats to try and negotiate something. Hey, France, can you stop? Can we come to some sort of agreement here? So when the delegates from the United States get to France, they are first met by these 3 French officials. We don't know what their real names are. They just went by X, Y, and Z. So they meet with the American diplomats, and they tell them that they are not going to be allowed to meet with any sort of French politicians until they receive a bribe. So these X, Y, and Z guys are asking the American diplomats for a bribe before they can meet with anybody to try and negotiate any sort of agreement whatsoever. So we leave. We don't pay the bribe. It was some millions of dollars. So we do not pay that bribe. We end up leaving. No negotiation is made. And so after the XYZ affair, there's a big call for war against France. And if you remember correctly, the political party that is most allied with France was the Democratic-Republicans. So it's after this XYZ affair, there's a lot of anti-French sentiment. A lot of Americans don't like French people. They don't like France in general. And also, by association, since Democratic-Republicans are pro-French and they like the French people, they are also going to lose a lot of popularity. So you'll see when the next election rolls around for Congress, for the the House of Representatives and the Senate, you'll see that a lot of Democratic Republicans are going to lose their seats and more Federalists are going to gain seats. But Adams, even though the American people want to go to war, they want to fight France, Adams is going to stay cool about all of this. He's going to try and maintain order. So President Adams is going to do a few things, though, within the United States that he believes is a good idea, but it ends up panning out that he kind of steals away a lot of your individual rights. He steals away Americans' First Amendment rights and also their 10th Amendment rights in the actions that he takes, and the Democratic Republicans are going to be very critical of him. So what he does is he has the Alien and Sedition Acts that are passed. He approves of it. Congress ends up passing it through as well. And what these Alien and Sedition Acts do is, first off, it made it a crime to criticize government leaders. It made it a crime to say anything that the government is doing is wrong. It made it a crime to criticize the president, to criticize any members of Congress. That's a violation of your First Amendment right. You had a lot of people that worked in the press that ended up going to jail for that. You had a lot of Democratic-Republicans that were criticizing Federalists in government that went to jail because of things that they said and opinions that they held about politicians. But because of the Alien and Sedition Acts, it was illegal to criticize those politicians, so they went to jail. It also restricted citizenship for new immigrants, specifically people that are coming from France. Adams wanted to be able to deport people just in case those French immigrants were going to be a danger to the American public. So he made citizenship more difficult to gain within the United States. He also made the ability to deport those French immigrants much easier. So Adams believes this is a relatively decent idea, and Congress does as well. They think that this is going to be good for the American people to help protect them from the French. However, it ends up that it's going to backfire tremendously, and it's going to look really bad on Adams, and it's going to look really bad on the Federalist Party, since they're the ones that pushed for these Alien and Sedition Acts, and they're the ones that end up making sure that it passes. So the Democratic-Republicans are going to be very, very critical of the Adams administration and the Federalist Party, because once again, they took away your free speech. They took away your ability to criticize the government, and also they made becoming an American citizen much, much more difficult. So, in response to the Alien and Sedition Acts, two individuals, James Madison, the author of the Constitution, and he will be the fourth president, and Thomas Jefferson, are going to write these two documents, the Kentucky and the Virginia resolutions. And what these two documents essentially say is that if a state does not agree with a federal law that is passed, so if the federal government passes a law and a state does not like that law, they feel like it's unfair, for instance, then those states may choose to do what's called nullification. They can nullify those laws or just ignore them, pretend like it doesn't exist. A good example of it is the illegality of marijuana. It is illegal in the United States of America. What states like Colorado and I think DC, it's legal there now, California, what they have done is they have chosen to nullify those laws. They are ignoring the fact that marijuana is illegal and therefore are allowing the either medicinal or recreational sale and use of marijuana in those states. How do they do that? They chose to nullify those laws or to ignore those laws. And that's what Madison and Jefferson are saying here. That's where that idea comes from. They say, hey, the Alien and Sedition Acts are unfair. Virginia does not like this law. Kentucky does not like this law. So as a result, we are going to nullify these laws. So this argument is a very, very strong states' rights argument. States have the ability to nullify laws they don't like. And these states' rights arguments and this idea of nullification will actually be used later on down the road by the South when they choose to secede just before the Civil War. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So just know with that, Alien Sedition Acts, John Adams, by the end of it, is going to be really, really unpopular at the end of his administration. And also know, Kentucky and Virginia resolutions and the fact that they are going to nullify the Alien and Sedition Acts. They're going to ignore those laws because they don't think it's fair. So Adams and his party is going to be incredibly unpopular by the time the next election is going to roll around. Adams is only going to serve for one term, and then Jefferson is going to defeat John Adams. And the primary reason for that is because the Alien and Sedition Acts were so incredibly unpopular. Adams is just not going to be able to compete with how popular Thomas Jefferson is instead. This is also, with this election, the election of 1800, which I'll go more into depth in class, is going to be the first time you're going to see a political party transfer as well. So you go from John Adams and Washington to a degree, who were both Federalists, and they're going to transition from Federalists to Jefferson, the third president, who was going to be a Democratic-Republican. So there's a transfer of power from one political party to another. After Jefferson becomes president, you will not see another Federalist president that is going to take office ever again. Adams and the Federalist Congress did such a horrific job because of the Alien and Sedition Acts that their party is essentially going to die off very, very slowly over the next few years, but you will never see another Federalist president again. So that's it for that. That's John Adams. Only served one term, super unpopular. Make sure you know with him, Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, Alien and Sedition Acts, the XYZ affair, them going off to France and trying to negotiate the safety of U.S. merchant ships and all that. So that's it for Adams.